right, joined now by Dave Capuano, our Bruins analyst. It's been a while. I haven't seen you since Stanley Cup, I guess.
Yes, it's a little bit of a disappointment.
A little bit on that Game 7. You were here with Maury, Ruth, and I were out in the studio. But here we are, and the Bruins are defending that Eastern Conference title pretty nicely. 65 points, tied for the best in the NHL, tied for the best in the Eastern Conference. They lead the division. Are you surprised how well they came out of the gates and are playing this year? Because a lot of people get that hangover when they lose a championship round.
I'm not surprised because of the leadership. I mean, Bergeron and Chara, they such great leadership.
Right.
So, and Marchand, I'm not surprised at how well they've done.
Now, when you look at that top line and those guys continue to produce, David Pastrnak leads the league in goals. We've always known he's had talent, but have you been impressed what he's been able to do so far this year?
Well, from what I hear, he's always worked on his shot. That was a big thing that was lacking for him. But his shot has improved immensely, and these guys seem to be just teeing it up in the right spot for him in the right situations. Now, the big thing is, can they do in the playoffs?
Right.
That's where it goes. They have that line, which is dominant, but do they have the depth, like St. Louis showed in the end, of winning the Stanley Cup? And I think this year is going to be tough, too, because you got St. Louis and I think Tampa Bay,
right,
who has a sour taste in their mouth from last year, was one of the greatest teams overall last year that we've ever seen in the NHL. So I think they have that taste in their mouth, and they have such great depth on Tampa Bay and scoring.
Yeah, Tampa Bay lost in the playoffs ahead of a potential Bruins matchup, so they got a little bit lucky with that road last year. What do you think's been the difference, if any? Most of the cast of characters are the same as last year with this Bruins team from a year ago.
I don't think it's much. They're points-wise, I don't know how much they're off from last year, but they just continue to grow. And I think the younger guys, DeBrusk has picked up. I know I was on with Andy Gresh early in the year, and I said, that's a guy that really needs to pick that game up because they need him.
Right.
The Charlie Coyles, which I kind of expect a little more. He's such a great player. He does so many things well. I'd like to see him get to that 20-goal mark because I think he could do that. But the Bruins, that's where they're going to need that depth lower on to bring this to the next level and to make that long playoff run be successful.
Another young guy who's apparently taken the step, I've been reading up on his play the last week. A lot of people are tuned in, Charlie McAvoy. Do you feel like he's sort of ascending to what could be one of the top defensemen in the NHL?
I do. I don't think he's scored yet.
Yeah.
I think I think he's got a long way to go offensively as far as the talent that he has, I think can be pushed more. But I think the Boston way is to play defense first.
Sure.
So I think offensively he has the ability, and he does take over games at times, but I do think that he's got great upside ahead of him.
All right, what kind of pieces do you think this team needs to add, if any, at the deadline or to make this team that much better for the playoffs?
I do think they're going to need something. I don't know if it's in the back end. It depends on how healthy they stay.
Right. Or
it's going to be up front. I know a kid like Tyler Toffoli coming out of L.A., he's got about 15, 14 goals, I think, there. He's probably going to be gone. There's going to be guys around the league that come trade deadline that they might look to up to play with Krejci on that second line.
Who you mentioned, St. Louis, you mentioned Tampa. Elsewhere in the NHL, what is your big view of what we've seen so far this year? And that includes what your brother's doing as head coach of Ottawa.
Well, Ottawa, obviously, they're in a trying year. But I think Washington's a team you got to look at, too, in the East.
Why do the Bruins stink against the Capitals? What is it about
Well, I
that?
think it's a matchup. Every game's a matchup. I think Washington's a big physical team, and they play a lot like the Bruins, and they seem to score more timely goals. But when you look at the Bruins' goaltending, again, their 1-2 punch is the best in the league, and I think that's what solidifies them. But I think that Washington is just a tough matchup for them.
Do you like the way Jaroslav Halak and Tuukka, I think, is 28 games and Halak's played 18, so it's not really a 50-50 split, but that seemed to work out last year with Tuukka being healthy for the playoff run. You like this?
Absolutely. And I think Halak, in the right frame of mind, could be a playoff goalie too.
Sure.
So I think they have that leeway where if something happens with Rask or if he gets hurt, because we've talked about injuries in the playoffs, it's a huge thing going down the stretch in playoffs. I think they have Halak too as a backup, which a lot of other teams don't have. Obviously, last year with St. Louis's run, Binnington steps in.
Right.
Without him, they don't win the cup.
Right.
So I think the same thing goes this year. You look at, unfortunately, the Predators coach gets fired. You don't know that team starts to go on a run. They have the ability there with good goaltending, great defensemen, and good depth up front to make a run.
Home ice is always great, but is it essential for the Bruins to have home ice in the playoffs?
I don't think in the NHL it seems to be essential like other sports. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's big. It helps. It helps. The lack of travel helps.
Right.
But I think it does help on the East Coast less than the West Coast.
Well, Game 7 was in the Garden. We knew what happened there. All right, Dave, thanks so much for coming in. As this Bruins season progresses, we'll be having you more in, and much more coming up on the Sunday Night Sports Wrap right after this.